Positive thinking doesn't work. Positive thinking doesn't work. That's what I told a woman just recently, because she asked me about Open Heart. And you know, Open Heart being a different community, a different faith community than many others, and when you try to explain it to people and you're telling them about the fact that we recognize the one presence and power of the universe, that's God, the fact that you create your reality through your thoughts and all of those things, and still people are quite trying to figure it out. And so she said, I get it. You're one of those positive thinking churches. And I looked at her and I said, positive thinking doesn't work. By itself. Y'all were worried. But the thing of it is that I think it's really important to talk about when it comes to our idea of positive thinking. And Chad Helmstetter probably sums it up in a way far better than I probably can. When he talks about the fact of what he calls our mental apartment. Our mental apartment are all of the thoughts that we have lived with us, those things that we have accepted, and those things that we every day we live with, that they are constantly there. They are constantly around us. Constantly, we, if you will, in our minds have furnished that mental apartment with all of those thoughts, with all of those things. And the thing of it is, and as we've talked about this month, that a lot of those thoughts that we have that are in our mental apartment are things that have been passed down to us. They are hand-me-downs, if you will, second-hand in many cases, if you will. And a lot of it is worn. It's worn, it's worn out. It's been there, it's kind of old and weary and crickety and all of those kinds of things like that. And yet it's there with us in our mental apartment. And so let's just say one day you have taken inventory of your mental apartment. You've looked around in your mind and you've seen those thoughts that are old and worn out and negative and all of that is just sitting around like old worn out furniture, and you decide that you're going to do something about it. So you call me up. It's a Saturday, and you call me up and I get over to your house and it's about 4 o'clock and we say we're going to start cleaning out your mental apartment and getting all of this stuff out that you no longer need. So we start taking, you've got some worn out thoughts about your success and your potential, and you've got some worn out things about who you are and all of that. And so I help you out and we take all of that and we put it out in the garage. And we set it out there, and then you stand about 6 o'clock, you're standing in the middle. We've done something. Thank you very much. And I greet you and then I leave, and then you're looking around your new space. You've gotten rid of all of that worn out, secondhand, hand-me-down, passed out stuff. You've gotten rid of all of it, and it's 6:30. You're still standing around and you're looking and you're smiling and you're feeling good, you're thinking positive and everything like that. And then about 7 o'clock, you're still walking around and you're looking at everything like that. And you say, well, I've been walking around for a while now, and 7:30 comes and you're looking around and you're feeling good and you're looking at everything, listen to all that and everything, and then I'm going to have to sit down at some point. So you think, well, one chair won't hurt. As a matter of fact, that one chair that feels kind of comfortable, as a matter of fact, it's got a little indentation on the side where I kind of would lean over and everything like that. And that one won't hurt. So you go out in the garage and you pull it back in and you sit back in the house and everything like that, and you sit down for a while. Well, I really want to have something to eat, and I need something to put it on. So, that table out there, it won't hurt to have that table, just the table and the chair. I'm going to stop at the chair and table, and that's it. I'm not going to get anything else. And you sneak back out and you put the table in there, and as you're going on and you're thinking about some other stuff, and you think, well, one thing won't hurt, and those two things don't hurt. I can get away with three. Pretty soon, you go out there, and next thing you know, your place is filled back up with the same stuff. SOS, same old stuff. And that's what positive thinking so often can be, that we read wonderful books and we listen to fantastic speakers and we go away fired up and we read the book and I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that and I'm going to read those things and I'm going to practice those things and I'm going to put those things in place. And so often, though, it's just like we cleaned it out and stuff slowly sneaks back in. Unless we've got a strategy. You have to have a strategy if you want to make it work. You have to have a strategy if you want some success. You have to have a strategy if you want to see results. So I need you all to help me this morning as we move through this strategy to remember. And so you see the number 5 up there, and I want you to say it with me, 5. 5, because you all can help me. So if you see me go like this, say 5, because I got to try to remember this strategy. And you know, deal with my own self-talk and deal with my own stuff. But there are 5 levels of self-talk. 5 levels of self-talk. And the first level of the 5 is what's called negative acceptance. Negative acceptance. It's like that apartment that's got all that house and apartment that's got all that stuff in there that we have come to believe the stuff that people said about us. We have believed it, and we find ourselves, as we talk to ourselves, saying, well, you know, I really can't do that. I really just am like my father. And usually when people tell you you're just like your daddy, they don't mean it in a positive way. Yeah, I am from dire circumstances. I never will amount to much. Who do I think I am anyway? That first level, that one that can be so debilitating, that one that can keep us from being where it is that we need to be. So that first level, level 1, is negative acceptance. Level 1 of 5 levels of self-talk. Level 1. Level 2 is where we recognize the need to change. We recognize the need to change in level 2. I mean, we come to Open Heart and we listen and we hear the things that people like John and Charles and Robert have to say, and we move from there and you know, we recognize the need to change, and we say stuff then like, you know, I need to lose weight. Don't y'all be amening on that one. I need to lose weight. I ought to meditate more. I should be more patient. But here's the thing that happens at level 2. We recognize the need to change. We say, I need to lose weight. I ought to meditate more. I should be more patient, and all of those things. But we declare those things without having a real strategy for accomplishing them. As a matter of fact, what happens is we say something like, I ought to exercise more. And then our subconscious says, but I don't have enough time. We say things like, I should be more patient. And then our subconscious says, but it won't make a difference anyway. And one of the things that you can do to sort of out your subconscious mind when it does those things is when you find yourself saying what I ought, what I should, what I need to do, then wait for a second and say out loud what the subconscious mind is saying about it anyway. Because if you listen for just a moment, it will be there. It will come out. And you'll say stuff like that, you know, well, I should be saving more money. But money's too tight to mention. I mean, it comes out. So we find ourselves at the second level of self-talk, where we will recognize the need to change, but without having a real strategy for change. And then what happens is that when we say what we need to do and we don't do it, when we have the subconscious mind come and start to say those things, what happens is we start to feel guilty. I ought to be on a diet, but I'm not. And then when you try to put those pants or the skirt or the dress or the blouse or whatever else on, and it doesn't quite fit, and you gotta suck in a little bit to get it on, to fasten the belt and all those things, you start to feel guilty. You start to beat yourself up. You start to then accept those inadequacies that you already had accepted at level 1, and then you're nowhere. Which brings us to level 3 of the 5 levels of self-talk. Level 3 goes like this. This is where we begin change. I like to call it the better you. That we begin to have a vision for what it is that we wish to have expressed in our lives and who it is that we wish to be. And at level 3, we begin to say things like, I am. I am. We begin to connect I am with the vision that we would wish to have. I am loving, and I am powerful, and I am engaged, and I am confident, and I am bold, and I am connected. And we continue to begin seeing ourselves in that way. And as we begin seeing ourselves in that way and declaring that, when we make the decision, as Raymond Charles Barker talks about, the power of decision, when we make the decision that we are going to, in fact, change, what begins to happen inside of us is those little steps begin to happen. And we'll talk about it a little bit more, but we have to continue to do that. And as we continue to do that, initially to say something like I am in a place of boldness, and I am in a place of power, and I am an expression of all that is. When we ultimately begin saying that in the first place, there's going to be a part of us that's still going to try to say the But sometimes you've got to make your I am louder than the is. And that's really important, because what happens is, for so long, we've been stuck in that pattern. I remember years ago watching in martial arts class where there was one of my colleagues in the class that was kind of like me, but, before he ever got in formal martial arts training, had watched Kung Fu movies and had learned all of his moves from Kung Fu movies and things like that. And, he would get up and he would do all of these kicks and everything like that. And the instructor told him that, that's not really how you kick in that way. And if you keep doing that, you're going to mess your knees up kicking that way. And here's the correct way to do it. And in the beginning, he kept saying, but it feels funny. It feels funny. It doesn't feel right. There's something wrong with this. And the instructor told him, well, you've been doing it wrong for so long that it feels comfortable. And so when you do it the right way in the beginning, it doesn't feel right. So when we begin affirming those things at level 3, we have to keep doing it until it becomes our new habit and it begins to feel right. Because remember, we talked about early on in the month the power of repetition. That the way we accepted and had those initial negative thoughts to be so strong is because we kept saying them over and over and over again. And we kept reinforcing them. And guess what? We found other people around us to reinforce them for us as well. Because you ever notice how when some days you are thinking certain things about yourself and, you might call it a bad day because you started thinking this or you started thinking that, and almost if by magic somehow, there'll be somebody around you that will say or do something that reinforces what you were thinking in the first place. And then we go on and we attract relationships like that. Uh-oh. We get ourselves in situations or circumstances where the people around us just reinforce that. So we have to continuously, as we're developing new habits, to continually do it and do it and do it and do it. And then after we move from the third level of self-talk, of the 5 levels of self-talk, then we move into the 4th stage, that after we have begin talking about the fact that I am, and we have moved from that, we begin the phase of recognizing and realizing how connected that we are to all things. And so we move into this phase. And as we begin talking about who it is and what it is that we are, we become connected, and we go from there and we move to the 5th level, which is that of universal affirmation. So we move from I am and declaring I am to that of universal affirmation. And that becomes things like infinite prosperity is mine to share. I am blessed. Because now we have connected up with the divine. We have connected up with what it is that is the source of the expression of the universe, and understood that we are a part of all that is. And so we move to that level that we begin understanding that. And so what happens then in life, what we have to begin doing is catching ourselves. We have to become aware of what it is that we are saying. We have to really get into the idea and the notion of ultimately what is going on with us and the conversation we're having with ourselves, and become resolved that we're going to make change. Become resolved to the fact that each and every day represents a new opportunity to do what it is that we need to do. There's a book, and we've talked about it in our Thinking Makes It So class, by Joe Dispenza, that's called Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself. Breaking the habit of being yourself. And what Joe Dispenza says in that book is that we wake up in the morning in the same way. We use the same finger to turn off the alarm clock. We get out of bed on the same side in the same way. We go into the bathroom and use the bathroom in the same way. We brush our teeth in the same way. We get our coffee and we prepare it and drink it the same way. We put on our clothes in the same way. All of that. And what happens is that as we continue to do that, we continue to reinforce the same patterns in our brains and in our minds over and over and over again. And so they become very deeply ingrained. And we then, whether we think that our thoughts create our reality, by that time our environment creates our thoughts. And so, because we're used to the same thing, seeing the same thing, we get to work or school, we see the same people and we respond in the same way. We sit in the same seat. You know, when I teach at the university, after the first few weeks, my students say, you don't take attendance anymore. That's because y'all sit in the same seat. I know. I know who's here and who's not here. We do it the same way. We become creatures of habit. And then we secretly expect things to change, to be different. But we constantly reinforce that. And so if you're not where you want to be, then you have to start looking at what habits we have been using to reinforce where we are. And so I think it becomes important. And see, a lot of times, a lot of this for people, when you say that and you talk about these things, it sounds kind of different and kind of out there and those kinds of things. But I'm standing here to tell you from a personal standpoint that it works. Then when you make the decision that you're going to think differently and that you're thinking differently, you're going to talk differently, and that you have a strategy. It has to be something that has to happen every day. You can't just do it every now and then, but you have to have a strategy. As a matter of fact, you have to have a script. It's like a program for a computer. The program that we're running on and operating on has to be reprogrammed in order to get different results. Because those of y'all that know from way back when the computer terms was garbage in, garbage out. So we have to come up with a script and with a program, and then we have to do it, and 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 we have to keep on doing it, and we have to keep on doing it, so that it becomes the strongest thing, the strongest voice, the strongest language, the strongest words, the strongest ideas, the strongest things, to do away with all that old furniture, that old programming, to do it over and over and over again. And when we do that, in the beginning, like I said with my friend, where it didn't feel, comfortable right then, it felt awkward and it felt strange, that over time something happens. There's a shift that comes in us. There's a shift that takes place. I remember years ago, and I've shared this story, but I share it because it is powerful, and it is where I can stand and talk about what happened for me. I remember a number of years ago when I still lived in Dallas, and I was in my first marriage, and it came to an end. And I was going through a really rough time as the divorce proceedings and all of that was happening, because I was a pastor. And I felt like a hypocrite. And how can I stand before a congregation and tell them each week to have hope? And God's going to pull you through things and all that. And back then I was, caught in that thinking that God was outside of us and all of that. And I was already making my journey to understand that I was an expression of God and God was within. But it was still tough. And the most difficult day of the week for me was Sunday morning. I almost wanted to pull the covers back over my head and stay in bed and not get out and stand up in the pulpit and feel like a hypocrite again. And I was desperate for something to help me change. And interestingly enough, I tried all of the spiritual resources that I knew of. I prayed, I read scriptures, I did all of those things. And just one day I just happened to get myself out of bed and go to a bookstore. And I was walking in the bookstore, and there was a book by Zig Ziglar called Meet Me at the Top. I got it, I read a few pages of it. And he said something in there that seemed really kind of hokey to me. And I was at that point, well, I'm going to try something. Because I got to move beyond this. I got to get out of this. And what he suggested was to just take an index card and to write 10 positive things about yourself. Okay. So I got the index card out. I started writing, and I was at number 3. And I really felt I was down on myself. I really had a tough time getting those next 7 things. So finally got to number 7. And I said, okay, I can get 8. But those last 2, I don't know. Because at that point, I just didn't have it in me. So I said, okay, I'm just going to, put these last 2 down so that I had 10. Because he said 10, I'm going to go with 10. Those last 2, probably, at least 7 of the 10. Because the stuff that was going on in my head and the stuff that had been said to me and the stuff that had happened, and all of that, I'm thinking, but okay, I've got the 10. And he said, put it someplace where you will see it every day. And 3 times a day, read that list. Well, okay, there's nobody around but me, so Nobody will have to know about this. And I won't let anybody in this bathroom so they won't see, this card that was taped to the mirror and be asking, what's up, all that. I didn't have to worry about that. So I taped it to the mirror. Every morning, I would get up and I would run through those 10 things. Those were I am statements. I didn't really completely know at the time. But those I am statements, I would run through those. And I would start to say them to myself. And then I said, well, say it out loud. Ain't nobody here but you. So I started saying them out loud. And I started looking at myself in the eye as I said those things. And I still was thinking, this is crazy, this is hokey. I'm so glad nobody's around to see this. But I kept on doing it. And I found myself not just in the morning, but I would take time out in midday. I had set another card, and I would carry it with me. And I would start to use that, and then before I went to bed at night, I'd go back in front of that mirror, and once again, I would go through that list. And I found that over time that as I said that, my voice started getting stronger, and I started going from just kind of saying them to really declaring them. And I started getting a little bit cocky. Back then I was one of those preachers that every now and then put one of those in there. Now over time, what began to happen, and let me tell you, it was not an overnight thing. It took me some months to get to what I'm talking about. But there became a point where I really didn't need the card, not because things had just transformed, but it was because now the things that were on that card were in here. And as I would say those things, I could look myself in the eye. And I believed it. And what began happening is that people around me started to say, something's different about you. Something's changed. And I had opportunities that then became my way. That before I was too stuck back there, that never would have happened because I never would have been in the situation or in the place, or more importantly, in the frame of mind to be ready for them when they became available. And so as those things happened, and as those things started to occur for me, change took place because the self-talk, the inner conversation that I was having with myself was changing. And I don't tell this story to be the hero or anything like that. I'm telling you that if you find yourself in a situation or circumstance where things are not working and you're not where you want to be and you feel like the positive thinking is just not really working, if you have a strategy, if you practice, if you develop the habit, if you keep on keeping on and you keep on doing it, change will happen.
Teach.
It doesn't happen overnight. We live in a microwave society, an instant download society where we feel like we can get things now, 2-day Prime or Amazon, all of those things. It takes work. But if you put in the work, things happen. Johnny Coleman told us it works if you work it. It works if you work it. Have your strategy. I would not be standing here today in Memphis, Tennessee, if I had not been standing in front of that mirror with those things that in the beginning I didn't believe, but by the time I finished and the doors opened and the opportunities came, that I found myself here, and I find myself standing in front of you, telling you positive thinking doesn't work unless you add the things that are part of it to make it work. Thinking makes it so.
So,
Thank you. Nice. So. That's it.
and so it is.
I count my blessings.